And before that, I did international work for 20 years. So, and I live very close to the river, and the office is very close to the river. So I always joke that I used to have this very long, very big scale of operations, and now my house, office site, and and project site are within a 2-mile radius. So that is all good. And so Dennis, want to introduce
Yes,
yourself?
well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Chestnut. I am a member of the Leadership Council for a Cleaner Anacostia River. It's a appointed position. We actually have to submit a lot of information, including the CV and other things, and answer some questions. It was really pretty intensive as far as I thought I was applying for a job. So once the mayor approves those appointments, the commissioners are able to participate with this Leadership Council for a Cleaner Anacostia River. And it's made up of a cross section of folks. I'm considered a community representative. I live in a community east of the Anacostia River. I live approximately a half a mile walk from the Anacostia River. And the community where this particular section of the Anacostia is located is the community where I grew up and still live. So it's the community and that area of the Anacostia River I'm very, very, very familiar with. And I believe that's one of the reasons that I'm a community representative on this Leadership Council for a Cleaner Anacostia River.
Okay. Let's see our slide clicker.
We will.
So today what we're going to talk about is, we'll start out with some background of the river, and we're going to then get into the environmental justice topic and how we are addressing that in our cleanup and restoration. So we'll talk about some of the federal and district EJ initiatives, then this natural resource damage assessment process, which is what we're embarking on now, some of the initial activities we're doing with that, and then we'll go back to what progress we've made and talk about our project partners. So Dennis is going to kick us off on the space that he knows very well.
Okay, so the Anacostia River. Just a little quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with the Anacostia River? Okay. How many of you live in Anacostia River watershed? Wonderful. And the last thing I'm also like to also point out to you as we go through this, that you can see it's 68 square miles, 700,000 residents. I believe probably within the Anacostia watershed, there's actually a larger number of residents who live in the entire Anacostia watershed. It's a tidal river, so it's impacted by the Chesapeake Bay and the Potomac River. So the Anacostia River, the headwaters of the Anacostia River is in Maryland. It's up in an area of Maryland called Sandy Springs, which is in Montgomery County. And it flows through the district to the Potomac River, which is on the southern end of the Anacostia River. A few points to make note of. As I said, it's a tidal river that runs approximately 11 miles between where it enters the city and runs into the Potomac. There is 128 storm sewers rather, the MS4s. We have a system referred to as the combined sewer overflow system, which we've made some tremendous improvements on. We'll discuss some of that while we're in here today. The tributary streams, the one that I'm really is the one that I focus on the most right now is Watts Branch, which is the largest tributary to the Anacostia River in DC. It flows out of an area in Maryland called Capitol Heights, and it flows into the district on the eastern end of the city and flows west toward the Anacostia. And of course, some of the challenges include contaminated groundwater, agriculture and urban runoff, and illegal dumping in landfills, tremendous challenges for us. So we'll get a chance to discuss some of those as we go forward.
Okay. And just a note here on let's see, the combined sewer overflows. So as Dennis said, we'll talk about that in a bit, but it used to be there was 16 outfalls and now it's only down to 3 because of our big investment on the Anacostia River Tunnel and the Northeast Boundary Tunnel that was just finished completely about a year ago from this month. It was October of 2023. So one of the problems in the Anacostia River is it was always sort of dividing the city, kind of the wrong side of the tracks. So back when the decision makers in Washington, which were generally appointed and we didn't have home rule, they would just put all the industry on, mostly on the other side of the river. So these are for our cleanup project, we have 16 potentially contaminated sites. This is sort of the 5 that right now have active cleanups going on. So this is upstream to downstream. So the first one, which is a really interesting site, the Kenilworth Park landfill, and Dennis can probably give some local knowledge of this when he was a bit younger and how the kids in that area use that space. But it is a really great space now. It's 83 acres north area. It's being cleaned up right now by the National Park Service, or the plan is in place, though we are tweaking the plan a bit. The north area is going to be transferred to the district, hopefully in 2025, as soon as we decide on the cleanup details. And then it will be managed by DPR, Department of Parks for DC, and they've already done some kind of soft outreach where, okay, what do people want to see in the space? Because it's been used for active recreation over many years, but it needs revitalization after the cleanup. And so it's also abuts a community that's really boxed in by 295. So again, you know, this 295 road, as it seems like a lot of people know the space pretty well, divides the community, and the community is they want it to be as good a space as possible, but they also don't want it to be that, okay, everyone from all over the district are going to come in and now be parking in their neighborhood where they really have no place to be. So there's a lot of very interesting environmental justice issues, even in figuring out how to revitalize this Kenilworth Park landfill. We have Benning Road. This is Pepco. This is a picture of it probably around late 2000s. So that was started in 1906 and dismantled. So these stacks are not there anymore. They were dismantled, and I remember that in 2012. Their primary contaminants are polychlorinated biphenyls, which is sort of the biggest problem with contaminants in the river. I'm not saying there aren't other contaminants, but they tend to be co-located with PCBs, so it's kind of our indicator contaminant. So our cleanup is really based on PCBs, and it's based on the fact that PCBs are passed up through the biota, so they're in the sediments, then they go to the forage fish. We have these big blue catfish that everybody likes to catch, the snakeheads, and so they're a real problem. So Benning Road, they have their own cleanup agenda, which is on their consent decree and their own schedule, but they have contributed to PCBs downstream in the river, because even though it's tidal, everything does more or less flow downstream. So they've already put in 57 million towards the cleanup of the overall Anacostia. I don't know if anyone saw that announcement. That was about a year ago also. And that was a big deal because that was the first collection, we'll say, of money. Because the district, the other thing that's really interesting about this cleanup and the restoration work under NRDA is that the district is actually financing it upfront. And then the lawyers are collecting the money. And so that is very unusual. It doesn't happen almost anywhere. So we have, if anyone, I would say the young people, if you want to be an environmental lawyer, there's plenty of work because there's plenty of money to basically collect. Because to figure out what's going on with all these chemicals and, you know, the restoration plans and the CLIA plans, it takes a lot of effort. But the district has financed everything up front to keep us going. The CLIA project started in 2014, but there were other studies that have built on. CSX is the railroad bridge. You can actually see it in this picture right there. So CSX, they've been around a long time too, 1870, they're cleaning up their yard. They had one of the coal cars, a train full of coal fell off into the river around 2000, I think. That was cleaned up, probably could have been cleaned up better. But they're also part of the mix. The divider, that the railroad bridge is a big problem, makes it so the flow gets really kind of stuck and really divides the upper Anacostia from the lower Anacostia. Probably there's one thing I could fix would be to get rid of that bridge. But
CSX.
yeah, that probably isn't gonna happen. Washing gas. 1888 to 1948, manufactured gas production, and then they had distribution to 1983. They also have big problems, lots of contaminants there. They're still kind of in the middle of their investigation. We're just starting to see some new sheens on their wall. And so we're still figuring out what we're going to do there. They also have no water in front of their facility. It's down to about 4 feet at low tide. So they have issues. And then Washington Navy Yard, oldest continuously operated federal facility in the nation, 1799. So you can imagine lots of things happen between now and then. So that is what we call the lead regulatory agency is EPA in that case. We're sort of second. I'd say that the district is more stringent in their view of what Washington Navy Yard should do than EPA. Because we need to have them consistent with our overall cleanup goals for the river, and they want to basically have their risk action level higher than ours. So this is a big fight right now.
A couple of things I just wanted to make sure we point out while we have this screen up. Gretchen mentioned some things, and how many of you are familiar with the political structure of Washington, D.C.? In that Washington, D.C. is not a state, as everybody knows, and it's a federal district. We do have elected representation locally for the city, but we have no federal representation in Washington, D.C. We have what is called a non-voting delegate to Congress who can't even testify on the floor in Congress, has to send messages through another congressperson in order for that to move forward. Even though we do have, we serve in the military and National Guard, all of the things that American citizens do. And the most important thing is that when the citizens of Washington, D.C. And through our council of representation and our mayor submit, for example, a budget, before that budget is approved through our council and the mayor's ready to sign, that cannot be passed until it goes through Congress for those representatives to be able to tweak it. You know, they want to add something in, or they don't like something that's there, so forth and so on. So that's very important to point out because if you can imagine between 1942 and 1970, when the municipal landfill was operating in Washington, D.C., the only municipal landfill that operated in the capital city. It was there was just a few people who were making the decisions around where that would be located, and all of the things associated with the citizens of the city had no say whatsoever and a landfill being right next door to where they live. So I just wanted to point that out because that's a very key point to understand in reference to giving some context to what things were during those periods of time.
And do you want to talk about the dial?
Yes. Now, one of the things that happened, they closed that landfill. You see 1970 listed there as the end date. Well, in February, so just imagine. I know, I don't know any of you all that maybe live near a landfill or anything, but that's the municipal waste. The municipal waste that comes from everywhere in the city. That includes hospitals, that includes, whatever, was dumped into that landfill. Right next to the river, right next to a community. The community which was right next to is called Parkside. And it wasn't secure because people could come in and out of there at will with no restrictions, except there were a couple of people that used to monitor the roadway where the trucks that came in to dump, they would regulate that. But there were all kinds of ways of coming into the landfill from the community. And of course, the children would be the ones who knew exactly how to navigate that and enter the landfill. So in 1968, in February of 1968, some children got into the landfill and were playing. And the way that they used to discard and get rid of all of the trash and debris is periodically they would use machines, bulldozers, to push it up into big piles. And they would set those piles of trash on fire. So they would burn the trash in there, and those burns were unregulated. I mean, it wasn't a scheduled time for burning. I mean, I guess it was depending on who was doing the burning. And it had tremendous impact on the community, if you can imagine. Air quality, think about, that period of time between 1940 and 1970. Air conditioning, for example, was not one of those things that was a common thing for people to have in their homes. So most folks had screen doors, screen windows, and ceiling fans, or fans, period, and to circulate air through their homes. And so in 1968, February of 68, some children, some young boys were playing in the landfill. And the attendants decided to start a burn. And these children were caught up in that fire. All of them escaped except one. It was a young boy. His name was Kelvin Mock. He was 7 years old, and he died in that fire in 1968. That was what caused the city commissioners, because it was 3 commissioners that managed the city at the time, to decide to stop the open burning. And came to find out that the open burning, which had been being protested on by the community for decades, was scheduled to stop weeks before that actual fire took place, but it just hadn't been implemented. And young Kelvin dying actually caused them to stop the burning, the open burning, that is. And within a couple of years, the landfill shut down as a landfill in the city. So that's just one story that's very important for us to understand, because when we talk about environmental justice, I call it environmental injustice. That is the classic example of environmental justice for a community that's forced to live between an interstate that was installed and that started being constructed in the 1950s. President Eisenhower had the Federal Highway Program going. And one of the things about Washington, DC, if there's something to be tried out, it's gonna be tried there first. And so Route 295, the interstate, it was called Anacostia Freeway, was designed to bring residents who lived in the bordering county to downtown Washington, DC, right through this particular community. And that added, not only did it destroy a portion of the community where that highway came through, but of course, you know, it brought all of the other kinds of things that, you know, a highway brings. Plus, just east of the 295 Expressway Highway is the CSX rail line, which was a freight rail line at that time. Recently, well, in the mid 70s, the metro system, the subway, was installed. So there was that rail system. But at any rate, just wanted to bring that to your attention while we were on this particular slide, so that you can understand that one of the early cases of environmental justice for this community.
Okay, all right. So we have a poll question. What is your general impression of the Anacostia River on a scale of 1 to 5? So 1 is polluted and needs help. 2, walking by it's okay, but don't want to get too close. 3, enjoy being near the river. 4, inviting for many activities, boating, swimming, biking, resting, and getting better all the time. 5, I don't know much about the river. So we'll just do a quick show of hands in the room. Who is a 1? Okay, too polluted, needs help.
There's a 1 in the chat. as
Okay,
well.
1 in the chat. I'm not really keeping it tall, but that looked like about 5. 2, walking by is okay, but don't want to get too close. Okay, a few more of them.
Got a 2 in here too.
All right. 3, enjoy being near the river. Couple enjoying people. 4, inviting for many activities, getting better all the time.
4 in the chat.
Yeah. And 5, I don't know much about the river. Okay, so I think we're kind of even almost on all accounts.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you'll feel better or worse. But we will see. Okay, so why should we clean up and restore the Anacostia River? So as I alluded to with the PCBs from PEPCO and Washington Navy Yard and other entities, there are PCBs in the sediments, that's the bottom of the river. And essentially they get into the fish. And so the primary reason what was driven for the cleanup, so the cleanup is following the Superfund process. So the Superfund process, if anyone knows, you basically do a remedial investigation. So that figures out the aerial extent of the contamination. You do a risk assessment. You say, what risk are these chemicals having to the people who are using or by this river and the biota as well? You do environmental risk assessment. Then you say, okay, what's most important? In this case, our driving contaminant concern was PCBs. The driving risk factor was subsistence fishing. So subsistence fishing in an urban community is, not as, we'll say, well-known as subsistence fishing in Native American communities, but there are Superfund sites that are driven by subsistence fishing because there's plenty of people, again, that live in disadvantaged communities that are getting part of their food source from the river. This is when we were putting together the feasibility study and the proposed plan, which is the plan of how to clean up the river. We were following other sites. There's other river sites. River sites are the most contaminated or the most complicated of these cleanups because you have all these, moving parts. But, you have the Hudson's, kind of the oldest one. That was a big PCB sites, GE, way upstream. They'll never be eating fish in that river because they really had big problems. The Passaic is actually just a little ahead of us. That's in New Jersey. I'm originally from New Jersey. And they actually had a big subsistence fishing population there because they have a large Asian community that likes to fish. In our case, we have people from Anacostia, Ward 7 and 8. In DC, we have 8 wards, and 7 and 8, and I guess some and 5 on the west side of the river do subsistence fishing. And so we had to look at, you know, who's fishing, fish consumption rates, all this stuff, and then you come up with the cleanup level. So we take into account, there's fish consumption advisories, and they've been in place for a long time, 1989. But people don't listen to the fish consumption advisories because, one, they, you know, have always done this, you know, historically culture, or two, don't know about it, aren't by a sign, you know, whatever reason, people just do not look at them. So we want to clean up the river so it won't be as a risk for people we know that will still eat fish. Now, I can say, in my experience, I'm in a competitive boat club on the river, and I've been there for 20 years. So I'm on the river all the time in my little outrigger canoe. I'd say, so I see people fishing all the time, and I've seen them for 20 years. I'd say there's probably now less subsistence fishing than there used to be, but that doesn't mean that, you know, all these things are sort of backward looking in the way that the cleanups and the restoration are viewed. Because, you know, 20 years ago, there was, I think it was a little more in the culture of mostly guys, older guys fishing. And, you know, these guys are now older and maybe not fishing as much. There's a lot more people fishing, I can say that, but they're probably catch and release fishers, but you never know. So the goal really in the cleanup is to have no fish consumption advisories, but quite frankly, I am not so sure that's ever going to happen, because now we're adding PFAS into the sampling for the fish, and they're, you know, it's like another item we have to deal with. So it's very important to get the word out, but we want to get these PCBs out of the river since they are, you know, major carcinogens. And then Dennis, you were going to talk about some of the other EJ considerations that we took into account in our cleanup and restoration plans.
Sure. Okay, so how many of you have a river or stream in proximity to where you live? Okay, so having proximity to that waterway should mean you have access to that stream or those streams and those waterways. So you should have access. So a lack of access is an environmental justice issue. If the community where the waterway is located does not have access to the river, then that falls under that category of an environmental justice, and I call it again an environmental injustice issue. And I wouldn't describe access the way that those kids used to come into the landfill, which was right by Watts Branch, and get to the river. But a lack of access to the river is an environmental justice issue. And at one point, the Anacostia River was widely known. Well, let me see if anybody in here knows what the word, the way they used to describe the Anacostia River. Anybody have not in the Anacostia River aficionados? It used to be referred to as the Forgotten River. Okay, that was what it was known as, the Forgotten River. Actually, people were told to stay away from rather than go to. And something significant happened in 2010 during the administration of President Barack Obama. He initiated a program called the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. And it started off identifying the 5 most polluted rivers in the country to begin through that initiative, the things. And because it was called a federal partnership, because there were, I think, somewhere around 17 agencies that were identified to bring whatever resources they could bring to bear on that urban waters initiative to clean up those rivers. The Anacostia was one of those 5, I say fortunately, but the Patapsco in Baltimore was also one of those that was identified, for example. And so, you know, some of as I said, this history of contamination in the Anacostia River. I mean, you heard Gretchen talk about Pepco, that's the Potomac Electric Power Company. Fortunately now, they're not a power generating plant like it was at one point. But it's a transmission plant. So, you know, it's like a intersection at a highway where they route electricity in different places. And of course, the release of hazardous substances into the Anacostia, you know, is a tremendous issue. Gretchen described it from the outfalls. Now, just think about, for example, we talk about the combined sewer overflow system. That's where sanitary sewers, which carries the bad stuff, whenever there is as much as what I think an inch like an inch of rainfall, the storm the storm sewers or the storm water system combines with the sanitary sewer system, and then they dump through those outfalls directly into the river. So for many years, that was what was underway as to why the river became so contaminated, that carried that along with, and think about those storm sewers, start with what's the rainfall that's coming off of rooftops and running off of roadways, and all of that goes into the storm drains, but then it combines with this sanitary sewage, and all of that dumps into the river. So that's the reason why you see this guy right here. The catfish wound up being a canary in the mine, so to speak, because they're the bottom feeders, and all of the bad stuff settles down into the sediment in the bottom of the river, and the result is fish with tumors. Even there were fish that were non-sex, they were male or female. They just, you know, were there, not able to naturally be what they are. So at any rate, you know, we can move on.
So now we wanted to talk a little bit about environmental justice and how it sort of is, you know, the top of mind issue now. Everyone's talking about why did that happen? You know, obviously this has been around for a long time, but there were a few things that happened, you know, somewhat recently that I would say kind of kick-started it a bit. One was this Justice 40 initiative. So that was Earth Day 2023. So the Biden administration said, okay, we're going to put aside some monies that are going to be available for vulnerable communities, and we're going to have our federal agencies have to incorporate EJ issues into their program. So that, I don't know if anyone's looked at this, climate economic justice screening tool. Basically, you can go to a community and say, are you eligible for these monies? And then the monies are actually coming from IRA and BIL. And then you have to figure out what grant. I mean, this is not simplistic, but it, you know, it is doable, and the monies have been expended. One of our grantees, Anacostia Riverkeeper, just got a grant with Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments for removing derelict boats in the river. So we have a lot of marinas in the river. They have boats that, you know, they can't get out of the mud, the owners die, you know, whatever the story is. And so they are problems because, you know, sometimes they have fuel on them, but they also are problems in that they're just catching sediment and making dams also. So they just got some money, and they're just doing an evaluation on how many boats they have money to get out, but they just got that money like 2 weeks ago. So we have a local example where monies were received. So that is always nice. So that's a Fed level. I just want to give a small example of at District Department of Energy and Environment. We were slightly ahead of the curve. We started in 2017, where we started looking at, okay, equity across the agency and environmental justice programming, and are we getting out to the communities we want to reach? So we started this equity council, and then we did pilot projects. And now we have plans that were put in place. But I guess I could say is like, so for example, internally, you know, we have 500 people at DOE and people come and go. So there's actually a fair amount of jobs at all kinds of levels, but you know, do people know about these? So how to get the fact that these jobs are available for everybody to apply to. And so they're doing a better, you know, our HR people are supposed to be doing a better job at doing that. As far as programming, we have, you know, this is just a slide of a lot of the activities. My colleague Ruby has been involved in some of these. The one that we just did recently, where is it? Well, we have oh, I know why it's not on, because it's a Maryland one. We have the Festival de Rio, but we actually, so we have a festival that actually is specifically targeted for the Hispanic community. And so that one is sort of new and, you know, a little bit of an output of our equity programming. We have our Kingman Island Family Day, which is actually tomorrow. And all these items, and we try to get the word out and in different, usually Spanish and English. So, but back to our project. So now we are cleaning up the Anacostia River and we are then restoring the Anacostia River. So cleaning up the river, yeah, as I said, is following the Superfund process. We are basically, there's 57 acres that we are cleaning up at various parts in the river. We're either capping, covering over. So the PCBs are no longer, and other contaminants are no longer available to the biota, and we're dredging in some cases also. Sometimes because it's too shallow. And then we also have this federal navigation channel, which is kind of another whole story. But if we cross the federal navigation channel, we have to dredge down, so it is at its U.S. Army Corps specified depth and width. So we're cleaning, so we're basically capping, dredging, and we're doing some in situ treatment. So that will take care of, you know, more or less the contamination, we hope. And then we're doing baseline monitoring now to get the conditions, then we'll do it again after we do the cleanup. We'll see how the fish are behaving. We might do more, but anyway, so this is sort of launched our remediation, and we'll start in winter 25-26, so next winter. So then, in concert with this, but slightly delayed, is this whole process called NRDAR, Natural Resources Damage Assessment and Restoration. That started in March of 2020. And so that what that's supposed to do is now restore the resource. So cleaning up the contamination doesn't necessarily restore the resource. So that's what this is all about. And I'd say it's more complicated than Superfund, because first of all, it's a case. So we are doing things, and actually I can't even talk about some of the things we're doing because it is a case. We have trustees. So the trustees are DOI, who are represented by National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We have NOAA, and then we have the district. And we're trying to get Maryland to join as well. And so now we are the trustees for the river's resources. But in our case, we are also all PRPs, which means we're potential responsible parties for the contaminants. So this makes it actually very tricky as well. But it is, you know, it has been done before, but it's just not so common. So the first thing when we started in, probably we had this pre-assessment screening is, okay, do we have a case, a potential case? And one of the trustees, Fish and Wildlife, took the lead and did this, what we call the PAS. Yes, this was a kind of a pandemic job. And they said, yes, we can continue on. Now we are here at number 2, assess and plan. And that's sort of where we're getting into the environmental justice and how it affects this. So basically now you figure out the injuries, what resources have been injured, and then the damages, how much are these injuries worth? So what usually happens with EJ issues is you don't really deal with them until you're figuring out what projects you're going to do. But what we've done in the case of the Anacostia is we've moved it up to stage 2, which is actually a little unusual. It probably is done only a few times with Native American sites. So this is probably the only urban site we've done it on. And because our other partners or the feds, there was, I know there might be feds here, but there was a fair amount of pushback because, you know, we're all PRPs and trustees, but we said, well, you know, if we're gonna do this, we're pretty happy in DC to be examples of good and bad. If we can't do it here for the Anacostia River, where can you do it? So we are continuing on as long as, you know, our funding to do this, continues.
And on
Yeah.
the collection of that data for the EJ, then there are a number of things that are able to be, information is able to be collected that has not been probably considered before this for being able to attach a value to. And that even involves the impact of these environmental challenges on the residents and the community where this is located. So this is going to be precedent setting, so to speak, that it will be able to be utilized. This lens will be able to be laid over other areas and make it easier to put a value to some of the kinds of damages that's been done beyond just the typical things that you normally look at. So we're collecting that information as well.
Anyway, we have this damage assessment plan, which is, all the things you can do, and the items that we're kind of talking about here are 11 and 12, or so the new ones that we've pushed up to stage 2, human use impacts assessment and the environmental justice assessment. And then, so this went out to public comment. It was out in about 6 months ago. So here's some of the things we're thinking about. Quite frankly, when Dennis and I decided to do this talk, we had thought we might be further along. But the thing about NRDA is if you think Superfund is slow, this is slower. So these are the things that we're thinking about now, okay? What's this NRDA process? Okay, I think we have that pretty well figured out. Okay, then what are the impaired natural resources? Air, water, biota. So we're like going through the list of the resources. And then this issue of lost human use services. That's kind of where EJ come into account. So the services are defined as what are the benefits that these natural resources are providing to a community. And have these benefits been diminished because the resources division is diminished? And what is that worth, having a diminished experience? So there's a lot of economists involved in this. We're collecting data now. So now we're looking at lost recreational services, lost subsistence fishing that we talked about previously, and then sort of this broader, do people not go down to the river? Did they not go down because they didn't have access? Did they not come down because it's dirty? Now is their well-being worse compared to the people on the good side of the tracks? And what does that all work? And now, you tally this up, and that's another amount of money that you can collect from your PRPs, hopefully. And, then these tools and methods, as I said, we're working through at this point in time. So now we're going to talk, and Dennis will talk about this, is some of the progress we've made. So that's what we're working on for NRDA and cleanup. But here's some of the progress we've already made. And
Absolutely. So one of the things I want to point out, everybody received one of these nice bags. And these came about as a result of an initiative that the district moved forward. That put a fee on plastic bags. And it put a fee on all bags, really, but it was designed to reduce the number of plastic bags that was going into the Anacostia River. Over in the community where I lived, they had given plastic bags a nickname because the plastic bags were everywhere. They were up in the trees. They were blowing down the street, so they called it urban tumbleweed, And so the 5 cents bag fee, as it's known, and I use the term fee because it's very important to understand that it's not a tax, it's a fee. Because you have the option to pay it or not. If you want to walk out of the store with everything in your hands, you don't pay the 5 cents fee. But, and if you bring your own reusable bag, like the ones we gave you today, and you can, carry your items up, you don't have to pay the fee. But if you need to have a bag to load your things in, it's 5 cents. And so now the other jurisdictions are picking up on that. And we feel very good that we kind of led the way in this DMV on that particular initiative. The Clean Rivers Project, DC Water. And this is really significant because what was done is a tunnel. You remember I was talking about that combined sewer overflow and those sanitary sewage dumping into the Anacostia River. Well, from this Clean Rivers Project, and Gretchen described it up in the very front end, there were tunnels. There are tunnels that exist. There's the tunnel that runs from, was it the, near DC?
Yeah, by RFK.
By RFK Stadium, to the Blue Plains Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant. And it is under the Anacostia River. How many feet do you have, man?
100.
Okay.
Well, we went down, I did the tour of this before they finished it, so you took a elevator, 100 feet down, and then you got in a train. There's like a whole city under there, so it's like the metro, it's 23 feet diameter, so it's sort of like being in the metro, though, if you're claustrophobic, I don't want to do this. But there's, and there was like a whole city, and basically now they're digging for the tunnel, so we can take this train to the head of where the digging, boring was, and then they like pass it back, the dredgings to the cars, and then they take it out. So yeah, it's really deep under the river.
Under the river, and what
Goes down to Blue
the Blue Plains
largest tertiary treatment plant in the
in the
world.
world.
So
Yeah, right there, largest tertiary treatment plant in the world. And so this sanitary sewage is pumped into these tunnels where it's stored. So that means it now is not going into the river. And then it is released to the Blue Plains plant where it can be treated. It has resulted in the water quality improvement in the Anacostia River as much as 98%. So that is tremendous. And as a matter of fact, the Anacostia River, we now have swimmable days in the Anacostia River. Swimming was made unlawful in the Anacostia, I think in 1977, somewhere around that. And so now we have swimmable days, not the entire river, but at various sections. And that's one of the things that we're really working to accomplish. We set a goal some time back for the river to be fishable and swimmable by 2025. And we're very close to achieving that.
one comment, remember, under the Clean Water Act, 1972, goal was what year should all rivers of the US be fishable, swimmable?
That's
Anyone
right.
know? 1983.
Oh my God.
Okay, so
yeah,
missed that.
Then we
free
missed the mark.
money.
So we missed that mark. That's right.
So it's good to set lofty goals,
That's
but
right, that's right.
sometimes they should be a little more realistic, I suppose.
So we want to just point this out because I still want to see if there are any questions that we can answer before we
Yeah, so
actually
now-
finish up.
Yeah, 5 minutes
Yeah,
left.
yeah, we have about 5 minutes left, but, wanted to kind of, finish up on a note that progress is being made, tremendous progress. 98% fishable, swimmable. As a matter of fact, I was interviewed by a French newspaper when the Olympics was going on because somebody picked up on our splash event. We had a splash, what we called the splash event, where we were gonna jump in the river and demonstrate, that it's now swimmable. And it got rescheduled a couple of times, and so they contacted me and said, hey, look, you were the guy supposed to jump in the river and, the E. coli, levels or whatever. So same thing happened on the Seine during the Olympics. They had to reschedule some of the swimming events because after a big storm and they had some releases and the testing showed up. So anyway, it was great. The article was in French, but I did get a chance to see the transcript. And we have a lot of other activities that are going on the river now. So we're moving in the right direction, has made a great deal of progress. Wanna,
Yeah, so why don't we, here's our schedule,
yeah,
we have stakeholders.
Right.
Oh, so we have a poll question number 2. What activities have you done on or by the river? Anyone done anything? Voting? What have you done? Voting, lots of voters.
Yeah.
Fishing.
Friday night fishing.
yeah.
Yeah, Friday night fishing.
Yeah, our Anacostia River Keeper has a Friday night fishing program. That's been going on very successfully.
What's that? Other. Yeah. Good, others, always
Okay.
good.
All right, all right.
So,
We got biking in the chat. They said the
Yep.
trail is
The
wonderful.
Anacostia River Walk Trail, has
Yeah.
anyone, got a chance? It's a wonderful trail that runs the full, length of the Anacostia from Bladensburg, Maryland, all the way to, the tidal portion of the river near the tidal basin, past the Navy Yard rather. But at this point, we'd like to see if there are any questions before we end. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to be respectful of your time, but I just have a couple, from the area and, of course, vested interest for myself, getting back to the bag. Like for the cleanups, I'm sure you'll see that single-use plastic is probably one of the most prevalent problems, like just the
the
bottle.
bottles, yep.
Yeah, and so like.
Skull.
Right, yeah, like what will it take for the district to ban something like that, where there's like
Yeah.
zero waste initiative so that, I mean, no matter how many cleanups you do, the production's still there, the consumers is still there, it's still coming in, you can only do so many cleanups.
Well, we do have, an initiative, we're advocating right now for a bottle bill. And, it was, attempted, well, we wanted to try it, some time ago, and there was some reluctance, the plastics industry, the bottle folks, they, they spooked all of the community and told them that it was type of thing that was gonna run everybody into the poorhouse and all of that. But we do have an initiative now where we're advocating for a bottle bill, and I think we have the kind of momentum now that hopefully will maybe, and I can't talk to this government person here, but maybe we'll be able to get this done this time, because now we have a lot more stakeholders, and the progress that we've made on the cleanup of the Anacostia is supporting that momentum. So that's to the best extent that I can say, and the 5 cents bag fee has been successful because what it is doing is, and there was a very key portion, that addition to it at the time that it was passed, and that was that money would be dedicated to the cleanup of the Anacostia River, and it wouldn't wind up going into the general fund for buying things, and other things and so forth, because it is now paying for those cleanups and paying for the programs, even the environmental education program for youth and the free river tours that, folks can take, on the river and all of those kinds of things. The Friday night fishing that was being discussed, all of those are being paid for from this 5 cents bag fee. So, that's the kind of progress that's been made.
I'm so sorry, this is the second.
Sure, yes.
Because, so the E. coli, that's like my big question, the materials and then the E. coli because of development. So my thesis is always being developed, I get that, it's pushing out, right? There's so many people pushed out in the Prince George's County. So as like the development is ramping up, what are we doing for the stormwater management aspect, right? Because I just feel like there's more hookups, like more toilets, more, right? So how is that? You mentioned it.
Well, we passed that one of the things we have the Green Building Act.
Yeah.
And it
Helps.
because of it includes things in the building codes that require the developers to do specific things associated with stormwater management, even to the extent if there's certain things that they cannot do actually on the site where they are building, they're required to invest in like rain gardens or green infrastructure or planting trees or something, somewhere else where those things are needed. So, it's making, those kinds of, it's helping in those kinds of ways.
I'm sorry to make you repeat yourself. That was a brief stuff.
Green Building Act.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat and I think I might know the answer. Why has the splash day been postponed 2 years in a row? And why do you think it will happen next year? I believe it's been postponed due to storm events that happened close to
Well,
the.
this one was a release.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
so I'll say generally, okay, the reason now that the E. coli might get elevated in the river has nothing to do with sewage anymore, unless there's like Hurricane Sandy. I mean, literally, we've gone from, 95 overflows a year to 2 that are estimated. So there really does not overflow anymore. But we have those 16 tributaries, if you remember that map I had at the beginning. And back to your previous question on, the development and the impervious surface. The thing is, we have these tributaries that are now in these urban neighborhoods that wash all the stuff in the neighborhoods into the streams. A lot of it is dog waste. So we also have USGS is doing some predictive modeling now to actually figure out what these E. coli spikes are after rain, and it is, it's basically probably dog waste. Could be also geese, but so the other thing that we're doing is we're rebuilding the streams, so they're, in their wild state. So what that does is, all the streams have their sub watersheds and they're draining their areas. So now if, they were basically channelized and, so it would rain and everything would just rush off the street into the streams and then straight into the river. But now we've rebuilt about 3 of them. We're, continuing slowly but surely to get through hopefully all these streams. And then it will make it so the attenuation of a storm is now up in the watershed and it will be, infiltration as opposed to rushing into the river. So that will help. So the reason generally that's kind of a different issue. There was, what Dennis was referring to was when they finished the northeast boundary tunnel and the Anacostia River tunnel was finished in 2018. The northeast boundary tunnel, which was really for flooding, it wasn't so much for CSOs. That was just finished October of 2023. When they hooked them together, they had to disconnect them for about a week because workers had to get down there and, do whatever they had to do to put these 2 huge tunnel systems now down to Blue Plains. Just so happened that disconnection occurred and we didn't know when this disconnection was going to be, and we don't actually hold the splash day. It is held, we permit it. Yeah, so anyone can hold a splash day. In this case, Anacostia Riverkeeper said, we want to hold a splash day. There's all these requirements, the testing and everything. So they decided on the date. And, we had said, well, these tunnels are going to be offline at some point. We don't exactly know when. Just so happened, as luck has it, it happened to be when the splash day was, and it was in August where we have the afternoon storm. But, what I said, it was actually really illustrative to me as, a small boater, because it was really a small storm. It was like an inch. It was awful. And people new to boating on the river, like, oh my God. I was like, this is how it always was. You don't remember. Before 2018, this is how it always was. And so, people, luckily, like the young people never saw it. The old people have forgotten. And so, it was really kind of eye-opening to remember, and I didn't even really quite remember, like, oh yeah, it always used to be like this. So that was a matter of bad luck. The one this year was, the storm was, it was no overflow. It was basically because the tributaries and, the storms, those kind of heavy storms in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Cause issues.
So that's pretty much.
But it's hopeful for 2020.
Yeah.
It sounds, we
It's
still.
definitely, and the other thing is
And I'm still on the
Anacostia Riverkeeper wants to
Same.
do it up. They want to do it off this dock that's kind of up in the watershed. If we did it lower, like down at Buzzard Point, the water quality.
But I want to say I'm still on the list
Yeah.
against,
Me too.
against my wife's, recommendation.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, so she, she, You know, she wanted me to put on a wetsuit and all this other stuff on before I put the
But
wetsuit
I've
on.
been in the river, I've been in the Anacostia a lot of times.
So, you know, yeah, I fought, yeah, when I was cleaning the litter traps, I fell into it several times, so it didn't matter.
We've
about
all
that.
been, you're around.
Yeah, all right. So, but are there any other questions quick before we leave? Because, you know, I really want to thank everyone for signing up for this presentation and for getting this information. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I actually had one question. What is capping? You referred to it when you were
capping.
talking about,
Yeah,
the way-
next slide, I kind of cut that one out. So capping is basically just a cover.
Mhm.
So you have the PCBs and the sediments, and now if you put a stable
like
cover over
where,
A layer.
where is the cap, like,
at the bottom of the river.
oh,
in the river,
literally
on the-
in,
on the
okay.
actual-
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
sediments are at the bottom. So we're basically, you know, because the catfish and, you know, the other.
So just like cover, like putting a little, like,
Put a layer.
little carpet over it.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, they did that for the landfill as well. So back in 1970, when they did shut it down, their remediation, so to speak, was a cap that they put on that landfill. It was, so it still leached into the river over time.
Right.
But that was because it was a 1970s era cap. So now that plan going forward, as Gretchen was describing, is going to be more up to date, and we look for a better remediation than what happened back in 1970.
Great.
Mhm. All right, well, thank you all very much again for coming, and I hope everybody gets to use your bag, so you won't have to pay that 5 cents.
Before you leave, please hand in your evaluation.
All right, very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, good
Yes.
job.
Good job.
I'll stand here at the
Despite
end.
not having in spite of the technical difficulties, huh?
Yeah.
I'm so glad that it worked out though. We,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh, yeah, just take this and get right here.
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, we didn't, when.
We can't, yeah,
when
we counted.
Oh,